Judge Brett Kavanaugh gets put through the ringer in his confirmation hearing. The New York Times runs an op-ed bashing the Trump administration. And I still don't have a live stream for this show. I'm Nicholas Zabladell, and this is a weekly update. So, unfortunately, I'm not the most tech-savvy person, and because of that, I don't exactly know what to do to get a live stream off the ground, so I apologize for that. And on top of that, I've also been putting off the chances of working on said live stream, so I'm bringing you the weekly update as just a recording and posting it afterwards, so I apologize for that. But, like I said, there are two big items going on this week, and like I said, they are the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings and the op-ed run by the New York Times criticizing Trump's administration/presidency. But to start off, I'm going to go through the Kavanaugh hearing, which, to be honest, is a three-ring circus, to say the least. CNN has put out a live update article, I guess, discussing what has been going on in the Kavanaugh hearings, and in the 3+ days that have been, or the 3+ days of the hearing, there's a lot that has been going on. So, to start off the hearings, obviously, the Democrat senators in the Senate Judiciary Committee were not having they wanted nothing to do with the hearings because the documents that they wanted were released, just hours before the hearing, and, they were wanting to adjourn it so they could review the documents, and the Republicans, they essentially had just, went right to the hearings, and Democrats wanted nothing to do with that. And then obviously there were the protesters, pretty much right off the bat. There were people in the audience screaming at, the top of their lungs, saying, Brett Kavanaugh, he's gonna essentially ruin the United States. He's gonna take away, women's rights to abortion, blah, 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 that sort of stuff. And there were quite a bit of arrests on the first day alone. I forget how many there were. There was, I think, like 6 arrests or something like that. And then, obviously, there was the big to-do about Fred Guttenberg. He is a father of one of the victims from the Parkland shooting. And he had said on Twitter that he approached Judge Kavanaugh, I should say, to shake his hand, only to be apparently snubbed by the judge. But, if you want my honest opinion, Kavanaugh looked at him and he was like, I don't know you. But then, even before he had a chance to respond, saying yes or no, he was ushered away by security, and that's what the administration, I believe Rod Shaw, the deputy White House press secretary, had said that's what had happened. Security wanted to take precautions because Kavanaugh was approached by a guy, and they didn't want to make or take any chances, I should say. But then there was also information regarding Guttenberg's presence at the hearings altogether, because he was invited, I believe, by either Senator Cory Booker or Senator Dianne Feinstein, and Guttenberg had posted on Twitter that he was going, or he opposes Kavanaugh to begin with, so, either he was going and showing a good, he was making a good faith gesture, or it was a political stunt. I mean, I can't say one way or the other of, what it was. But then, the documents issue, like I said, that was released, the 42,000, I believe, documents were released, just hours before the hearing even started, and the Democrats were livid because, they wanted to review documents from Kavanaugh's time in the Bush White House, because he was an aide to someone, I forget, what his exact role was, but they wanted emails from him saying blah, 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 and obviously they ended up getting them, but they wanted them, earlier. So Democrats were very, I guess, not pleased, to say the least. Obviously, like I said, they wanted to adjourn, the hearing before it even started, just to review it. So, there's a lot of people saying Republicans are making, a political game out of this by releasing the document, by releasing the documents just hours beforehand. And interestingly enough, I forget, but one Republican senator, I forget who it was, he had said that, if Democrats wanted Judge Kavanaugh's, private documents, like his emails and whatnot that they ended up getting, can, Kavanaugh or other senators get their private emails, just for sake of transparency, because, for them to claim to not get, documents regarding Kavanaugh's time in, the White House, can senators get other senators, documents regarding their time in office? So that was one thing that I had found interesting, and, I don't necessarily disagree with it, but at the same time, if the Democrats want to make that argument, they're going to have to, be consistent on all grounds. They can't just say, oh, well, we want your documents, but then we're not going to provide it. And, that was pretty much just the gist of day one, and then day two, it got even more interesting. There were more arrests, more shouting. And then I watched a little bit of day two, and the part that I had watched was the exchange between Judge Kavanaugh and Senator Feinstein over firearms, the constitutionality of President Trump being indicted or subpoenaed, and Roe v. Wade. Now, Judge Kavanaugh's major point for his judicial philosophy is the term stare decisis, which in legal terms, that is the principle of using precedent to, to base your rulings. So, Dianne Feinstein was asking Judge Kavanaugh, for abortion, would you overturn Roe v. Wade? And Judge Kavanaugh had said, according to the principle of stare decisis, I wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade because, that is a precedent. And then there was another Supreme Court case in the 90s, Casey versus Planned Parenthood, which reaffirmed Roe v. Wade. So there is precedent with Roe v. Wade, and then precedent upon a precedent with Casey v. Planned Parenthood. But they had gotten into a heated discussion over the Second Amendment, and Judge Kavanaugh, like I said, he uses the stare decisis argument, and, it was also used during the exchange with Dianne Feinstein over the Second Amendment, because... So I had found an article on the Washington Examiner, and this was from Wednesday, and it is entitled, Dianne Feinstein Grills Brett Kavanaugh Over Second Amendment Rulings. I'm not going to read the whole thing, I'm just going to read a couple bits and pieces from it. The article starts out saying, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh said Wednesday he has consistently followed precedent when deciding cases that involve the Second Amendment, defending his prior opinions during a round of intense questioning by Democratic California Senator Dianne Feinstein. The ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee spent several minutes grilling Kavanaugh on guns during his first full day of questioning on Capitol Hill. On Wednesday, Kavanaugh said he used a test developed by the late Justice Antonin Scalia to reason that semi-automatic guns were commonly used in the United States and previously determined to be lawful possessions. Feinstein fired back, claiming that widespread possession does not amount to common use, and probing Kavanaugh's thoughts on school shootings. And this is just me here saying, Dianne Feinstein wanted to essentially say that, they weren't widely used and it's unusual for them to be used. Well, Judge Kavanaugh had said, well, look at the amount of guns in the U.S. and tell me that they're not widely used. I mean, guns are meant to, cause harm to people. So, what is, the determination for unusual, usage of it. And then I believe he also had made reference to how most handguns in the United States are semi-automatic. So, for them to say, to get rid of semi-automatic weapons, because a lot of Democrats, when they talk assault weapons ban, they want, a few of them say that they want, to get rid of all semi-automatic weapons. Well, that would include, semi-automatic shotguns, semi-automatic rifles that, aren't AR-15s, and then pretty much every single handgun. I mean, there's a few that are, revolvers, but, a vast majority of handguns are semi-automatic. But, like I said, Judge Kavanaugh, a big basis for his argument is, legal precedent, and that's what he wants to use to make decisions for his, if he were to become a Supreme Court justice, he'd look back at precedent and say, well, similar cases have rulings like this, so I want to rule in the same way. But I have a couple issues with that. I mean, for him to say, to use precedent, I mean, there are Supreme Court cases that have gone against previous Supreme Court cases. I want to point out two they're already settled cases. One is Plessy v. Ferguson, and the other one is Korematsu v. United States. These two Supreme Court cases, obviously, many people, if you don't know what they are all, Plessy v. Ferguson, that was the separate but equal argument. The Supreme Court said blacks can be equal, but they have to remain separate from whites, and that's, where we got the Jim Crow laws and then the segregation. And then Korematsu v. United States, that was the decision by the Supreme Court during World War II to legally intern Japanese Americans based on national security reasons. And, looking back at it, from, the perspective of, a current, American citizen, obviously we can say that those were wrong, to intern American citizens and say, Americans of different, skin color have to stay equal. But, like I said, those, the Supreme Court already ruled on those, so what would be the precedent for ruling on a case like that? I mean, for you to say, you want precedent, but then, you look at, like, a couple of cases like that, how do you rule, on something that, if it was similar like that? Obviously I would, I'm probably going to say, Kavanaugh's probably just, wanting to, shore up Democrats' beliefs that, abortion is going to be, removed, women's health is going to essentially be, removed from the United States. There's going to be back alley abortions, people of different, ethnic origins are going to be, banned from the United States, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And, I don't know if Kavanaugh is that radical of a conservative judge, but, he's obviously trying to play to the, to the Democrats because, I mean, he's had rulings in the past that, are of concern to, those Democrats, and he would want to make sure that he, wins over those votes. But, it's funny because I had found an article when I was looking up, Kavanaugh and Feinstein's, back and forth on abortion. I found an article by Vox, and I don't have it up right now, but it was essentially saying, if Kavanaugh becomes a Supreme Court justice, he's essentially going to, remove, or he's going to end Roe v. Wade because of, there was like 13 different Supreme Court cases that still need to be decided. And, they're saying, if Kavanaugh becomes a justice, these cases could end, a woman's right to an abortion. And, I don't know if Kavanaugh would necessarily be, one to, I guess, rock the boat, but, obviously they have their concerns, and, Kavanaugh in his hearing is saying, I would use legal precedent, so I really can't say one way or the other, but I don't want to get into the abortion debate, and, if Democrats, if they, feel that upset about it, they're probably not going to vote for him, vote to confirm him, but, they should, try to take, him for his word. I mean, obviously they're going to take it with, big enough grain of salt to where they'll probably not vote for him, but that was just on day 2, and then day 3, once again, it was a 3-ring circus. Feinstein continued grilling Kavanaugh, and, she obviously wanted to continue, hammering him on abortion, and he's like, well, I already told you my judicial philosophy on it, so I don't know why we're still here. And, I don't know how, what more they'll want from him, except for, if you were to, if we were to redo Roe v. Wade, if he were to vote in favor or against it, if they were to flat out ask him that, I don't know, if they would, but, it seems like they're trying to get him to say stuff, that'll, essentially put a nail in the coffin to not confirm, Judge Kavanaugh, but, that wasn't even the most interesting part. It got really weird when Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey thought he was going to take a bullet, so to speak, for the team, for the Democrats, when he said he was going to violate Senate rules by releasing emails that were quote-unquote committee confidential, that were from Kavanaugh back in the Bush administration. And Booker said, I'm going to release the emails about racial profiling, and I understand that the penalty comes with the potential ousting from the Senate. Now, there's a lot of conservative hosts who believe that Cory Booker's doing this just as a political stunt for him to, put his name on the radar for a 2020 push. And, I can't, say I disagree with them. I don't know, how badly Cory Booker's going to want to, make a push for the presidency, but, this was definitely a political stunt, so to speak, considering how, if you're going to just violate Senate rules like that, I mean, it's really stupid for him to do that, especially considering the email that was released, because that CNN live update article had the highlights of yesterday, and Cory Booker, he was at the top of the list. The article says, as expected, Senator Cory Booker has released a dozen additional emails, some of which are labeled committee confidential. Booker has not yet responded to CNN's query if the materials had been cleared for release. Here's what's in some of the emails. A 2001 email in which Kavanaugh suggests that a White House policy director was giving up too much ground in negotiations and not sufficiently protecting religious interests in proposed faith-based legislation. He starts that email with time to vent about disappointing changes, quote, made to the faith-based bill, end quote. There are other emails show his connection with Federalist Society members, including Jay Sekulow and Leonard Leo. Kavanaugh listed his long-time relationship in the Conservative Legal Society on his Senate questionnaire. In another email, Kavanaugh is concerned about a DOJ memo that in his view would, quote, create incentives for states and law enforcement agencies to, quote, establish constitutionally impermissible racial, ethnic, or gender classifications. The full memo is not provided, but he may be suggesting that such a designation wouldn't be holistic and therefore would be impermissible. And then finally, also included is the email released earlier that concerns writing on abortion. Now, I had found a article from Fox News, which has just a gist of the email that was released by Cory Booker. And it says, in a 2002 email, Kavanaugh, who was working as a lawyer in the Bush White House, said he, quote, generally, unquote, favored race-neutral security measures, but said they need to, quote, grapple, unquote, with the interim questions of what to do before a truly effective and comprehensive race-neutral system is developed and implemented. Kavanaugh wrote that the interim question is of critical importance to the security of the airlines and American people in the next 6 months or so, especially given Al-Qaeda's track record of timing between terrorist incidents. So, CNN is referring to a 2001 article or email, essentially saying, Kavanaugh wants to discriminate against, people of religious interests, and, I would assume that they're making a reference to, people of Islamic faith, but then, a year later, email that was released by Cory Booker, it says in a 2002 email, he generally favored a race-neutral security measure, but then they also needed to grapple with the, race-neutral system, because, obviously there are some people who have, implicit bias towards people of other races, so, he wanted to find a system that would work for everyone and not just be, completely, discriminatory against people of, different, different backgrounds. But then I also had found, I was doing a little bit of research today, and someone had said that, actually no, I was watching the Ben Shapiro show today, actually, and he had said that the emails were released, beforehand, at, sometime late last night or early this morning, or the morning, or the night prior, Wednesday morning, I should say. And Cory Booker really didn't even need to say, I'm going to violate Senate rules, by doing this, because they were already declassified, so they weren't confidential to begin with. So, there's an interesting take on that, considering how I said, this could have been a political stunt for him to, make a push for the 2020 presidential Democratic nominee. But that's all I've got for the Kavanaugh hearing, and that's as of yesterday. There's obviously stuff going on today, and, there was the whole issue of Kamala Harris asking him about the, his connections to the Kasowitz law firm. I'm not well versed on that, and there are other people who have, discussed that more in detail, but I'm gonna move on to the anonymous op-ed that was run in the New York Times, and I had read through it, and it made my head legitimately hurt, because I don't understand what the author wanted to get out of this, because they're saying that they want America to be successful, but, the president is not making, America successful, and he's actually causing more problems, even though things have been going well. In essence, that's kind of what I had gotten out of it. But the article starts, President Trump is facing a test to his presidency, unlike any faced by a modern American leader. It's not just that the special counsel looms large, or that the country is bitterly divided over Mr. Trump's leadership, or even that his party might well lose the House to an opposition hell-bent on his downfall. So that was the first, paragraph or two. And I don't get how they can say, like I said, the article commends Trump for doing good things, but then, they later go on to say that, they're going to disrupt parts of his agenda. Well, they don't specify what they're going to disrupt. And they also say, like I said at the, in the first, paragraph or so, Trump's leadership is causing a massive divide, in America over his leadership. And, they say that that's not the cause, but then they also say that's the reason why they're resisting him, because, I have the article pulled up here. They say, but we believe our first duty is to this country, and the president continues to act in a manner that is detrimental to the health of our republic. So they say that that's the reason why they're resisting him, but then they also say that's not the major reason why, they're writing this article essentially. But they also say that President Trump, he's a very amoral person. He's not, grounded to any, principles, especially conservatism. He ran as a Republican, but he doesn't believe in, Republican ideals, the free market, smaller governments, just basic liberties, and there have been discussions regarding how, this is written by someone in the White House or, someone in the New York Times. It's just a fluke to, stir up his base. And, I guess, I can agree with parts of, this article by saying, he's amoral. He's, a very pragmatic leader. He, likes to rile people up, and, he doesn't operate under the philosophy of, no news is good news. But, if this was written by someone in, the White House, you could, if I were that person, I think that it would be smarter to use this as almost like a blackmail against the president and say, you're not running the White House or, the administration like I had hoped. I'm here, I don't know, depending on the person, the level of the person, they could say, I'm working for you, you can fire me, but if you fire me, I can take this to the New York Times and, make my name public. But, for them to publish it anonymously, it seems like, it's too convenient for them to write it anonymously. If they're trying to, ensure Trump does things correctly, it would seem like they'd want to, almost blow the White House up and, try to, get the president to, essentially start over, and, right the ship instead of, just trying to subvert him, because, in essence, that's what they're trying to do here. They're, like I said, they believe this is written by someone in the New York Times, which it very well could have. I honestly would put money on it either being Jared or Ivanka. It's known that they're Democrats, and for the president to, do, things that, are very, he hasn't done all conservative things, but he has done, things, but like, loose regulations on, businesses. He's cut taxes. There's, like I said, he's done conservative things, but, he's not a conservative, like I said, and like the article says, but they're trying to, get the president on track, and they don't say what they're trying to, what they want to accomplish by getting the president, or, to, essentially, like I said, subvert the president. So it's, I don't know where, who's gonna, or, where this person's going with this. I've heard people say this is political suicide. If you want to get fired by the president, that's how you do this. And I just heard on the news today that President Trump is asking the DOJ to look into, who wrote this, which, that gets into a problem of, Trump's, going against the First Amendment, and, for this article to just be published in the first place, people are wanting to invoke the 25th Amendment, saying Trump's not, capable of, sitting in the executive office and stuff like that. So things are getting weird, to say the least. But on that note, that's all I have for today. Just a friendly reminder to like the weekly update on Facebook and follow me on Twitter at StNickZ7. And I want you all to know that through vigilance and strength we create peace. And as St. Paul writes to the Corinthians, now the Lord is a spirit, and where the spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Peace.